Have you ever just looked around at the world and wondered, why? Why do some people have so much while others have so little? It's a huge question, one of the oldest there is. And today, we're going to try and find an answer. We're using Yanis Varoufakis' fantastic book, Talking to My Daughter About the Economy, as our guide to unpack the hidden logic and the strange history that built the world we live in right now. You know, the entire massive puzzle of global inequality, it really all boils down to one incredibly simple question. So, this is the question that kicked everything off, asked by the author's own daughter. And let's be honest, it's a question we've all probably asked ourselves at some point. Is all this inequality just a bug, a result of humanity being, well, stupid? Or is there something else going on, a deeper logic at play? Okay, so to get to the real answer, we actually have to flip the script. We need to stop asking about things like intelligence and start asking about history and geography. So forget the question, why are some countries rich, for a second. Instead, ask yourself this: why didn't the Aboriginal people of Australia invade England? The answer to that question revealed the fundamental accident of history that gave some societies a massive and often brutal head start. It all comes down to one thing: food. More specifically, having extra food, a surplus. The moment some societies figured out agriculture and could grow more food than they needed just to survive, literally everything changed. All that extra food could now support people who weren't farmers: soldiers, priests, bureaucrats, inventors. This is what allowed for the creation of complex states, of writing, of new technologies. And here's the kicker. Because of its shape, the Eurasian continent just happened to be the perfect place for these crops and ideas to spread from east to west. It led to guns, germs, and steel. It was never about people being smarter or better. It was about the pure luck of the geographical draw. So these new societies, they didn't just have different gadgets and bigger armies. They developed a completely new way of looking at the world. One where everything, and I mean everything, has a price. Think about it like this. We all live with two completely different kinds of value. First, there's the feeling you get watching an amazing sunset, or hearing a great joke, or helping a stranger. That's experiential value. It's real, it's powerful, but you can't put a price tag on it. And then there's exchange value. That's the number on the price tag. The story of our modern economy is basically the story of taking more and more of that priceless experiential world and turning it into commodities, things that can be bought and sold. You know, this shift in thinking, Oscar Wilde just nailed it with this quote. Our entire society slowly started to act like his famous cynic, becoming experts on the price of everything while forgetting the value of anything. And this is where things get really weird. This clash between price and value leads to some bizarre outcomes. Take blood donations, for example. What happens if you start paying people to donate blood? Logically, you'd think you get way more blood, right? More incentive. But nope, you actually get less. The payment, the exchange value, it just muscles out that simple, powerful feeling of giving a gift to save a life. It commercializes an act of altruism and in doing so, destroys the very motivation people had in the first place. Turns out some things are just too valuable to have a price. So what was the engine that drove this massive global takeover of exchange value? Well, it was the powerful and frankly pretty dangerous marriage of two big ideas: debt and profit. See, for most of human history, the process was simple. You made something first, then you sold it. But our modern economy, it flipped that completely on its head in what Varoufakis calls the Great Reversal. Now, to make anything, you first have to borrow money. You have to start in debt. That single, simple change made debt the fuel for the entire system, and it created this constant humming pressure underneath everything. And this new bargain, man, it was a scary one. The old legend of Faust, the guy who sells his soul to a demon for a taste of power, suddenly became the perfect story for this new age. The modern entrepreneur is Faust. They go deep into debt for a shot at making a profit, but they live with the constant, terrifying fear that if they fail, the demon of debt will come to collect. And you have to get this because it's the key. The system forced everyone into this relentless, non-stop hunt for profit. It stopped being about simple greed. It literally became a matter of survival because in this new world, you always started in the red. This relentless hunt for profit unleashed two powerful and kind of spooky forces that now haunt our modern economy. Machines that can feel like our masters, and money that seems to appear out of nowhere. Let's start with technology. It's kind of like the Frankenstein story, right? We build all these incredible machines to serve us, to make our lives easier. But in that endless, competitive race for profit, those same machines can start to feel less like our servants and more like monsters that have turned on their creators. And this anxiety is captured perfectly in The Matrix. It's the ultimate modern fear, isn't it? What if we're not really in charge anymore? What if we've just become batteries, powering a system that no longer has our best interests at heart? Okay, so if the machines are one ghost in the system, the second one is even weirder. It's what Varoufakis calls the black magic of banking. Here's the big secret. When banks lend out money, where do you think they get it from? The answer is nowhere. They literally create it out of thin air. So how on earth does this work? Well, when a bank decides to lend someone, let's say, £500,000, they don't go to a vault and check if they have the cash. They just type the digits into the borrower's account, and just like that, poof, new money exists in the world that didn't exist a second ago. They are basically pulling value from the future into the present, all on the promise that it'll eventually be paid back. So this whole journey through surplus, debt, haunted machines, and phantom money, it leaves us right here, right now, facing a really fundamental choice about where we go next. We are standing at a crossroads with two totally different paths forward. One path says, commodify everything. Let's solve our problems with more markets. Put a price tag on rainforests, on clean air, on our personal data. Let the market sort it out. The other path says, democratize everything. It argues that our shared world, our environment, our digital lives should be governed by shared decisions, not just sold off to the highest bidder. And look, it all boils down to two very different kinds of power. In the world of the market, the rule is simple. $1, one vote. Your influence is directly proportional to your wealth. But in the world of democracy, the rule is different. One person, one vote. Your influence as a citizen is equal to everyone else's. The choice between which of these systems should have the final say, well, that's going to define the world we build from here. And that's really why we've gone on this whole journey. By digging into the strange, often hidden history of our economic system, we can finally arrive back in our own time, but see the world with completely fresh eyes. We can finally understand the invisible forces that shape our lives. And once we're back where we started, we get to ask the biggest, most important question of all. Now that we know how this whole thing works, what do we choose to do next?